Councilors, if we could, I'd like to convene the meeting, the Committee of the Whole, Thursday evening, April 25th, 2019 at 7 p.m. for the review of the Aggregate Industries 2018 Annual Report. With that, I will defer to Councilor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. President. As required by the special permit approved by the Peabody City Council in 2002, Aggregate Industries is required to submit an annual report to the city. This report contains all the details of the quarrying and hot asphalt plant operations, as well as summaries of the required air and water quality tests, in addition to noise monitoring. Tonight's our opportunity to make comments regarding the report, as well as recommend any changes. And before I begin, I do want to take a moment and thank Ward 6 residents Bob and Mary Callahan, as well as Joe Finnegan, who they, along with a number of other committed citizens, have worked hard over many years to put in place many of the protections for the surrounding neighbors of Aggregate Industries and our city that are contained in the special permit. We also have members of Aggregate Industries operations team, as well as a representative from the blasting contractor here tonight if any questions arise. I know that all members of the City Council received a copy of the annual report, but since it's over 700 pages, I thought it might be helpful just to kind of give an overview for the record. So in 2008, which is what we're talking about tonight, there were 10 blasts at the quarry. The special permit requires reporting if there were issues with any of the blasts, especially regarding violations relating to ground vibrations or air blast limits in excess of applicable limits. Also, there is a requirement for any evaluation of a blast that is given a written complaint sent to the Peabody Fire Department. While thankfully there were no written damage claims in 2008, as there were in some recent years, there were a number of verbal complaints made to the Peabody Fire Department for the first blast of the year, which was April 5th, 2008, and that 2018, sorry, thank you, resulted in 8 calls for a variety of complaints, excessive noise in their opinion, vibrations and shaking in local residents, and that did run through quite a bit of Ward 6. And then there was a second blast that resulted in 3 calls from residents on September 20th, 2018. Sharon Cameron of the city's health department did review the report in terms of compliance with the noise and air quality data attributed from the activities at the Aggregate Industries site. We all received a copy of that. She reviewed it very briefly, saying that the noise levels taken at the 6 residential properties were below the threshold established by the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. And in terms of air quality, the testing for volatile and semi-volatile organic compounds were below occupational exposure, as well as residential reference concentrations. One of the more important parts that I wanted to get at tonight is in terms of the water quality testing. The special permit requires very stringent both testing and monitoring. As we all know, the water that leaves Aggregate Industries site does flow out to the Norris Brook wetlands. There are many different barriers of layers of protection at the site in terms of sediment ponds and monitoring wells. And right now, the original special permit that was created in 2002 requires testing on a semi-annual basis to monitor water levels and collect groundwater samples for various chemicals. And right now, that testing is done on an annual basis as opposed to twice a year, and that was accepted and made that exception by the Department of Public Services as allowable in the special permit. That was done in 2006, and while I don't have any immediate concerns about the quality of water that's coming out of the site based on the tests over the years, I do think it's time to maybe have the Department of Public Services weigh in on whether we want to kind of go back to the original special permit and require semi-annual testing. And that's one of the motions I'll probably make tonight at the end after we get that. And also there is additional testing required in the special permit regarding monitoring of national pollutant discharge elimination systems, outfall 001. That is in the actual permit, so hopefully I didn't butcher it. And there's just additional requirements for pollution discharge measurements and monthly samplings. And once again, that's something that I'd like to see the Director of Department of Public Services weigh in on whether we want to, go back to the original reported requirements in the special permit. So I'll make that as probably a second motion tonight. And while it would not be considered a discussion item as part of the annual report, I do want to mention that we did have a few phone calls regarding heavy trucks using Roosevelt Ave, which is not allowed, and that was done in June of last year. And I do want to commend Aggregate for, once we made the call over to them, they reiterated the traffic flows, and that should not be happening, and they were very helpful in getting that done, and obviously we want to make sure we prevent that from happening again. What I want to do is, that's just kind of some of the general overview items. I didn't know if we wanted to open up to fellow councilors if they have any questions or items, and then I guess if it's allowable, while it's not a hearing, I'd like to see if we could have some residents ask questions after the councilors.
Thank you, and that works for me. If any councilors have questions, we'll open it up to the floor. Seeing none, Councilor O'Neill, if there's any residents that would like to come up. If any residents from Ward 6 regarding Aggregate, Ward 5, would like to come up. And would you like to invite a representative from Aggregate to speak?
Sure, whoever, is
Okay.
it maybe Kurt or Stephanie, or in terms of just coming up?
Hi, could you just please state your name and address for the record?
Okay. My name is Stephanie Herbster. I'm with Aggregate Industries. I'm the Land and Environment Manager. I'm based out of our corporate office at 1715 Broadway in Saugus. I prepared and submitted the annual report in compliance with the special permit we have with the city. There was nothing that stood out. We did hold, in this most recent report, there was nothing that stood out to highlight in terms of being an issue on the site. We did hold our regular annual meeting with the neighbors and abutters to the property. That was right around mid-March, I believe it was March 20th, and it's a good opportunity for us to field questions and talk to the neighbors about some of their concerns. We did receive a number of comments and just general discussion on our annual report. We're always open to feedback on how we can improve it, things that they might want to see added into it. So again, we're open to that. One of the topics was about that reduction in the frequency of groundwater sampling, as well as the reduction in the parameters that we test for. We do have all that paperwork that went through in the analysis, but it was back in 2006. So we're open to any feedback on that. And that is pretty much all that I have for the report.
Thank you. Councilor O'Neill.
Thank you, Stephanie. So I guess just to appreciate your openness in terms of looking possibly at having some additional testing. I have not formally asked the Department of Public Service or the director to evaluate that as of yet. And I know that certainly we want to be understanding of if we look for additional reporting, we want to work with you to kind of get that into, in the process, if you will. I just think it makes sense, given that it's been a while, and maybe just to kind of continue testing. And if they agree, we can, maybe amend that in the future. And with that, I'm sorry, I see Joe Finnegan, who is the master at reading this annual report and looking at all that, and is a trained engineer. So if he wants to come up and make some comments, I'd appreciate that. Joe Finnegan.
My name is Joe Finnegan. I'm a member of the Russell Street Ad Hoc Committee for taking a look at the annual reports provided by Aggregate Industries. I've had many discussions with many of you in the past, and we've tried and coordinate every bit of our activities as far as review purposes with as many people as we can. And I'd like to just touch base with two or three things. If we take a look at the special report, you don't have to, I'll make reference to it. One of the things that they have spelled out pertains to page 19. And it talks in terms of quarrying operations. And it talks in terms of the horizontal expansion. The footprint of the quarry excavation shall not be expanded beyond the limits of the quarry rim as depicted on the plan prepared by Norwood Engineering dated May 9th, 2001, which was quite a while ago. And the depth of the quarry pertains to the bottom of the deepest part of the quarry excavation shall not extend below a depth of 485 feet from the existing rim level. With the rim at about elevation 75 feet, the maximum depth of any portion of the quarry excavation shall be elevation minus 410 feet, mean sea level. Putting things in perspective, the size of the quarry and its operational area is approximately 15 acres in size. There are 4 different small drainage areas that discharge through the sedimentation system that was put in to the quarry system back about 5 or 6 years ago, and it discharges into Norris Brook. One of the things that was always a question when we're reviewing this is that we don't have a plan of the Norwood Engineering plan, so we've requested a copy for the ad hoc committee, and I'm just mentioning this in passing is because there is a stipulation in the special permit that pertains to this, and I'm not sure that everybody in the council has copies of the special permit number 33. I'm going to make reference to certain pages in the annual report, 656 to 658, and this is a BSO Group groundwater sampling report that was prepared for Aggregate Industries based on only one quarry visit with the groundwater samples taken from the 3 wells. And the question that I have is that if we take a look at the specifics of the special report, special permit, it says on a semi-annual schedule or such other schedule as is established by the Department of Public Services, the applicant shall measure the following parameters in groundwater wells, and it talks in terms of things. So my specific question to Aggregate Industries is, have they received notification in writing that only 1 sampling per year is required? And if that is so, has it been stated in any other previous annual report?
So, and we did take the opportunity to look back at our files. We had our consultant BSC group back in 2006. They had prepared their analysis and their recommendations for reducing the frequency as well as the, I guess, we can stick to just that.
Okay.
The sampling, it's up to you, either the sampling frequency as well as the NIPD's parameters. It was all in one letter, BSC group's recommendation that came to the city. The city had the recommendations from our consultant reviewed by an outside consultant, Weston and Sampson, and they provided a letter with their recommendations to reduce to the annual sampling and to reduce the number of parameters. We then got the email approval from, it was Richard Carnevale at the time, the Director of Public Services. So we do have all of that documentation.
Okay, I guess my question then is, has it ever been established and put into the report so that anybody who reviews the report realizes that?
And that makes sense. We can absolutely add this in as a standard section of the report.
Okay, so
that
will
we'll
it
add
be
that in.
to this one, or something will be sent to the council which says that?
Sure.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. The second question that I have pertaining to monitoring the discharge from the quarry into Norris Brook pertains to an outfall monitoring section E.3, and it's pages 702, 703, and 704 of the report. These 3 pages constitute Aggregate's report on their monitoring, which is measuring activities of water quality parameters at the outfall 001 location. However, I have reviewed all of the section E4 of special permit number 33, which is located on page 17 and 18 of the special permit, and I do not feel that Aggregate's 3-page report adequately meets the requirements of the special permit. Therefore, at the upcoming City Council hearing, ask the Department of Public Services if their requirement of monitoring 12 water quality parameters at outfall 001 has been met, and if so, do they have something in writing, and if so, are they going to show that in the next annual report?
And again, that exact topic was covered in those, it was combined, the frequency as well as the sampling parameters. So there was a significant reduction that was approved by the DPW in the same letter and in the same letter report reviewed by Weston and Sampson. So we can certainly add that to the report as well.
And I only have one other area of concern that I'm going to be raising, and it pertains to 3 of the plans that they show in their annual report, and they're located on pages 713, 715, and 718. And the reason I'm raising this question is because it's the different types of development plans and landscaping plans is something that's spelled out in the special permit. This happens to be one of the plans that they show, and it's entitled 2019 Mine Plan, but from a mine, M-I-N-E. But from a practical point of view, although this looks kind of impressive, it's extremely small, and you have to have a magnifying glass to read it, and it should be at least 2 or 3 times the size. And the specifics as to what is shown on there should be something similar to what is asked for in the special permit. In like manner, this is an aerial view of the development. The size of the quarry, by the way, from a circumference point of view, it's got a diameter of about 1,500 feet, which is pretty big size. But this doesn't show too much either. It's a pretty picture, but it doesn't really show too much. It should be 3 or 4 times larger, because what it's supposed to be showing is what kind of development is going to be taking place in the mine during the next coming year. And it makes it very difficult to understand what the heck's going on. And I've had discussions with Aggregate, and I have to say they've been very cooperative in anything that we've even asked for or suggested. And the whole idea behind this is just in the future to make these better reports. And lastly, the third aerial that they have shown here shows the landscaping, and they show different types of things with regard to a berm and other types of things that they've done at the site, such as vegetation and so forth, which, as far as I'm concerned, is adequate. But so from a practical point of view, if they would consider including or changing the size of the maps to make it much more meaningful to the average reader, it would make it a much more complete report. And the last thing I'd like to say, it's been a pleasure dealing with you. Thank you.
And just to speak to those last points, we can certainly work with you on plan size. As time's gone on, we've reduced the number of hard copies that we're producing, and most of the reports go out on thumb drives or electronic version, which does give you the ability to zoom in and zoom out, and we can certainly take recommendations for what size we should include in the hard copies that we produce.
One of the things that I've recommended is they can continue to do this, because it's the only thing I want to review. I don't want to review something on disk.
Oh, yeah, we're certainly willing to do that, yeah.
Councilor O'Neill, if you could you receive Mr. Finnegan's brief summary of his report?
So moved. I'd like to make a motion to receive Joe Finnegan's report of the 2018 annual report. So moved.
All in favor, any opposed? It's a vote. Councilor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess at this point in time, I'd just like to, where possible, echo Joe's Finnegan's comment. You guys have been appreciative of what we're trying to do, and just ask on the mine plans for 2019, or I guess the projected, as it goes to the council members and other city departments. The paper copy is great, because that ultimately will be the historical record, and CD drives, and it may not last. It's just nice to have, maybe if we could have a pullout or something like that. But I appreciate the understanding with that request. At this point in time, I'd like to, if there's no further questions by other councils, I'd like to make 2 motions. The first one being request Department of Public Services evaluate Section E reporting requirements of the the special permit regarding testing and monitoring of water levels and groundwater samples, whether we should go back to a semi-annual schedule versus annual schedule. So moved.
On the motion, all in favor, any opposed? It's a vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. Second motion would be to ask the Director of Department of Public Services evaluate Section E, Item 4 of the special permit regarding monitoring of the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System at Outfall 001, and whether we should amend the parameters of discharge measurements back to the original special permit requirements or as currently in force. So moved.
All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move that the City Council move that the City Council accept the 2018 annual report as submitted by Aggregate Industries. So moved.
All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote.
Motion to adjourn.
It's a vote.